Today's mini lesson is on applying the CRAP test, which is an acronym we're going to learn here in a second, to improve your evaluation sections. So the evaluation sections of a counter-argument paragraph have to acknowledge that you have used two pieces of evidence. Therefore, you need to demonstrate understanding of how one piece of evidence is better. However, you remember when we did our no red ink lessons recently, better is such a vague word. So how can we clearly argue that evidence is better? The first way is C, currency. This has to do with the timeliness of one article versus another. Maybe one is more recent, whereas another is out of date. R is reliability, or the correctness of the article. So does one author provide citations and references, whereas the other might use his or her own experiences and opinions and rely on biased information? A stands for authority. So if you remember, when we introduced nonfiction sources, we used TAC, title, author, and credentials. And the reason we pointed that out is here is where you can talk about in the evaluation how the author's credentials don't make that person necessarily qualified, or they might make that person biased. P, purpose. This has to do with the author's motivation for writing, the reason behind making a speech, putting something on the internet, putting it in their blog, right? Acknowledging the motivation behind that person's writing. So here I have an example evaluation sentence. Michael Mack, an English professor looking to preserve his Shakespeare classes, argues that studying Shakespeare will help college students find themselves. However, notice that use of that conjunctive adverb there. He neglects to recognize that Shakespeare, a dead white guy, does not represent today's modern and diverse students. Notice the order here. Okay, so this particular person is a con person, meaning they don't want to teach Shakespeare. So the first piece of evidence starts with the pro, acknowledging the pro. So from Michael Mack all the way themselves is that first side. Then after this comma, it goes back to the con, which is the side this person decided to argue, right? So this clause here argues for the side that they're trying to argue, which is against teaching Shakespeare. So whatever you do in your evaluation, you want to do it in that same order. So whatever you have in your body paragraph, you want to think about those two pieces of evidence. Start with the first one, that counter argument, and then use something like a conjunctive adverb here, right? And come back to your side of the argument. All right, next I want to kind of point out the evaluation piece that we've been focusing on, how we incorporated CRAP within this lesson. So Michael Mack, an English professor looking to preserve his Shakespeare classes. Okay, notice the part here that I underlined, an English professor looking to preserve his Shakespeare classes. All right, I'm trying to point out here his motivation. Michael Mack only has a job if he can teach Shakespeare, right? That makes him a little biased, all right? So you want to do something like that. Now notice here, comma, and I don't know why this one's clear over here, but it should be comma here too, okay? So this whole phrase is in a positive, pointing out the flaw in the fact and what makes him not as good and how the second one is better. After you write your evaluation, then you need to think about how to flow back to the conclusion, okay, the last sentence of your paragraph. So notice I used a SWABI here. You don't have to, but that really does help with the flow. Because Shakespeare's works do not represent today's modern and diverse students. I put this in highlighting here, and I'm going to go back to the previous slide so you can see how I use words from the evaluation to begin the conclusion. So let's go back here. All right, so remember, I ended this evaluation here saying a dead white guy does not represent today's modern and diverse students, okay? So then I took that phrase and I started the conclusion with similar words. Because Shakespeare's works do not represent today's modern and diverse students, notice my comma here at the end of the dependent clause, teachers should stop teaching Shakespeare and should replace Shakespearean texts with more modern and diverse authors, okay? So I intentionally repeated something to help clarify the argument. Notice that this goes back to the thesis and back to the original prompt, right? Because the question is whether or not we should still teach Shakespeare, all right? Be intentional. So now it's your turn. I want you to focus today in your body paragraphs. I want you to write your evaluations and your conclusions. And so most of your body paragraphs should be finished before you leave today.